it's going to be a real treat, this one. It says the Digital Procurement Forum, and we've got 4 incredible speakers here from Procurement and Supply Chain Live stage. Starting with the far right, we have Nick Wright, who's Director of Procurement, Innovation, Digital and Talent at BP. Nick leads BP's Procurement Digital Garage, and he's passionate about digital innovation and making procurement cool again. Interesting. Next to him is Sheldon Maidat, founder and CEO at Sopico. Sheldon's a respected expert, evangelist and speaker in the field of supplier relationship management and has 25 years of experience in procurement. Next to him is Waleed Al-Saidi, Director of Supply Management at Abu Dhabi Tourism and Culture Authority. Again, masses of expertise and a visionary leader who's helped transform the procurement landscape in the UAE and beyond. Notably, he earned the SIPS Platinum certification in record time, a prestigious honour achieved only by 12 organisations worldwide. And then next to him is Dirk Karl, Group Executive and Chief Procurement Officer and member of the board, Global Sourcing Company at MTN Group. Dirk has overall responsibility for sourcing and supply chain across the MTN Group and oversees a multi-billion-dollar spend portfolio across 19 countries, I think still 19 countries, serving more than 280 million mobile subscribers, as well as the platform business of the MTN Group. Dirk has 25 years of experience too. And word on the street I hear is that he's having his office in Dubai extended to accommodate his growing awards cabinet, which is bursting at the seams. I think you've added to that collection in the last few weeks as well, Dirk. So a fantastic panel. Please welcome to the stage. So rather than this being a boring Q&A style, we're going to try and make this as much of a conversation between, 4 fantastic leaders and innovators in procurement. And so it's going to be hopefully a bit more like a conversation. Anyone who's watching here in the UK or watching online, a bit like come dine with me.
Without the bad food.
Without the bad food, yeah, that comes later on. Without the bad food. So hopefully it's going to be a bit of a discussion, hopefully some debate, and people are not going to see eye to eye on every topic. But if these people can't answer some of the questions that you may have, then I don't think anyone's going to be able to answer them. So we will encourage questions from the audience as well. And if you're watching us online, remember you can ask questions by using the event app Umbrella and using the Slido function there. So please do get involved. Those questions will be fed straight to my iPad here. Right, so to begin with, digital procurement is an increasingly important focus area. I think we can all agree on that for procurement professionals, and we've got some of the very best right here. So, what are some of the benefits of incorporating digital technologies into the procurement process? Now, we only have 40 minutes, so I realise we're going to be quite top level on a lot of these answers. But Dirk, I'll come to you first. So what are some of the key benefits of incorporating digital into the procurement process?
Thank you, and good morning to everybody, online as well as here in the room. I was always doing the digital pledge for effectiveness, not efficiencies, in terms of throughput time, etc. Now, effectiveness in terms of what am I going to do with the data? So what insights I'm gaining out of that sort of digital approach, out of the tooling. Insights in terms of effectiveness. So is it helping me to make conscious decisions, better decisions, knowing the data for strategic sourcing events? So that's the ultimate goal, what we are running in my organization.
And Nick, you obviously, obviously a digital evangelist, if you like. I don't like to keep using that word evangelist. But what's your take on this? Because you're clearly, it looks like a slightly different generation to the rest of the esteemed panel. So what's your take on the digital opportunity?
Were the trainers a giveaway?
I think they were, yeah.
Must be. I think with digital procurement, we can fundamentally change the nature of procurement and what we do with the organisation, with the function. I think there's efficiency and effectiveness plays for sure, but I think providing your procurement teams with additional space and time to do the deep thought, the deep thinking stuff, the partnerships, the data analysis. It's providing the bandwidth and the thinking time to achieve the bigger results than just pushing out spreadsheets or running RFPs. So I think it's a really broad question, but I think in essence what I would say, for me, one of the biggest benefits of digital is just the space and time.
Waleed, is that something that you've experienced over the course of your career? Because obviously, if we go back 25, 30 years, digital simply didn't exist. So how have you seen digital come to impact procurement?
Good morning, everyone. Actually, like 10 years ago, they started talking about the digital in procurement in specific. But what I notice most of the time, it's not easy to make things happen. Like, especially when it comes from the digital partners, they have a lot of these initiatives, but in a practical way, adapting that is really challenging. And I think part of that, we come with a lot of legacy from our old days, and we find it hard to make it happen. I like the comments from the first speaker here, I think Mark, where he talked about where people tend not accepting the change easily. Add to that, if we consider that percentage of 70-74% of the work easily could be automated, yet when it comes to the implementing, people tend to make it a little bit harder and more difficult to make it happen. And that because, especially with us as procurement, a lot of professionals tend to focus on the governance rather than focus on the delivery and make things much easier for the users. This generally what happened.
And you mentioned there data governance. Sheldon, I'm going to turn to you here. How important is data governance and analytics when it comes to ensuring effective digital procurement?
It's very important. Morning, and thanks for having me. But can I just give a quick answer on the previous question? So the benefits are, it's a big question, you need to unpack it, because procurement tech, it spans different areas. So for example, S2P software, you've got a range of source to pay type software, the benefits are broad. For example, better buying decisions, then maybe contract management solutions, better contract management, being able to use the data to drive better performance of contracts, for example. Just giving one example for each. Collaboration software, better working collaboratively, shared R&D, working to explore innovation, maybe CSR or social values software, being able to drive better audit compliance operationally, down in the footprint of an operation, risk management software. So obviously the benefits are far and wide, just depending on the different type of software that you're using. So risk management, maybe better data, sort of disruption, good example, I suppose. Better insights, better mitigation in terms of, in terms of different types of disruption. So there's a few different applications and use cases, and obviously the benefits will vary accordingly. So on to the next question, which was data governance. So obviously this is all about data. All of those procurement solutions across everything I've just described, it's all data. Everything comes down to data. So if you're using, so for example, if you're deploying KPIs and you're using poor data, then you're deploying KPIs into a dysfunctional environment where, I mean, it's not doing anybody any good. So it's important to have integrity of data, good data sets. Number one, I think different data. So we focus at Sapika, we focus on largely on unstructured data. So we don't necessarily look at systemic data, the ones and zeros, very, very much in the unstructured kind of holy grail of conversation, documentation, secure chat, all of that stuff that happens out in the ecosystem. And 90% of company data is unstructured, but mostly hemorrhages. And you're not going to want all of that data, but you certainly need to be able to weed out the kind of wheat from the chaff in that data. And so that's a very, very important, if you like, exercise to understand that data. So if you're being, in our case, a relationship management platform, it's looking at performance, but it's absolutely looking at harnessing that unstructured data that lives out inside the operation, inside the business.
And would you say that companies, in fact, Dirk, I'll come to you for this, do you think that your organisation, for instance, is doing well when it comes to managing that data and understanding that data and maximising its potential?
Yeah, allow me to combine it actually with the first question and the data governance on this part, because we should be proud about our practice. And if someone is disrupting the business with a digital approach, or digitization now being the hype, right, then it's procurement. And it's not a new story. Because look at the ERP packages. I mean, in my time as a CIO, I was implementing JD Edwards, bought by Oracle, right? Or PeopleSoft. Yeah, so it's the HCM or the HR function and the procurement function where they have all started delivering ERP packages, which gets me back to my comment about efficiency. It's not about the efficiency. It's now about the data insights in the data-driven procurement organization. Because I guess everybody in the room and online has a contract management system, right? That cannot be the disruptor in terms of digital. Everybody has an e-sourcing suite, most likely, in the cloud sitting there, right? Everybody has delivered or has in his organization a data lake, a data mart. Can't be that sort of disruption or effectiveness now. I mean, I have a risk management solution. I have a nerve system for supply chain, of course, in my markets, right, to track it. But that's not data-driven procurement organizations. That's all about efficiency, maybe some integration, middleware approaches. Everybody has an e-sourcing suite and does electronic auction. That's not the disruption. And when we talk about data governance, it's about how I'm enabling my organization to have this data, not at their fingertips, but have key data available to make decisions effectively and more effectively that can bring maybe other financial results, that those insights can bring risk mitigations to it, and how I'm going to enable it. And I can tell you, I've seen procurement organizations that announce a garage, then announce a CDO, Chief Digital Officer now, to adopt those solutions. Because we have a lot of best in breed. We even may be over that sort of phase to integrate it, have a data lake, have a business warehouse. I can write those reports, but it's still not adaptation of those solutions. So I'm looking at this sort of digital disruption and data-driven approach to change the procurement organization in its totality. It's very transformational. It's not just having those tools, specific use cases, specific user groups that would be exploiting this. No, it needs to be broadened. In my organization, there needs to be a large community using those tools. And my job is actually, on top of it, to make sure that this kind of insight is being given because the data is there. So that cross-fertilization, particularly now on the governance, on the compliance, on, let's say, effective strategic sourcing decisions, on contract management, right? It needs to be easy to use, and it needs to be incorporated in our culture, in procurement, in the organization, as well as in supply chain as an organization to be used, to be usable, right?
Totally agree. Can I just add to that very quickly? I think that as more and more of the procurement organisation is digitalised, the more efficient it will become, and as it's still, in the main, a bolt-on to many legacy processes, manual processes, and that's always going to be the weakest, the weakest point in that process. I mean, McKinsey did a study that said that digital platforms, digital ecosystems that use live actionable data are able to secure an additional 3 to 10% incrementally on an annual basis, simply because they vacate the legacy governance process. Through any digital platform, wherever it happens to be within the procurement kind of arena, umbrella, if it's still using static data or relying on static processes, then it's missing a huge opportunity, and it's never going to transform, because true digital transformation is end to end. And if it's missing a big chunk in the middle of it, that's going to be its weakest link. So yes, a huge opportunity there if you can encapsulate all of those processes into the digitalized space.
So it's a huge opportunity. I mean, Waleed, for instance, do you think, I mean, are we close to getting this complete end-to-end digital process, or are there still some manual aspects, like Sheldon was talking about, that are still retained and are going to be more challenging for us to overcome?
That's very much possible. Consider procurement as one of the main stakeholders when it comes to the procurement and supply chain. So we need to work with our stakeholders, with IT, with the project owners, with the suppliers, understanding the market, understanding the real need of the organization, and build based on that the opportunity that we can really add value. It's really challenging, because sometimes even if we have the vision how to make the transformation, some of these stakeholders not yet there, and we need to take them with us. And this one of the challenge which I saw in each and every ERP system project we face, where it's little bit about how make things aligned with the rest of the stakeholders. In same time, it become sometimes challenging to adapt the latest technology and digital tools like AI and machine learning when you're using ERP system which doesn't really yet there when it comes to these tools. Good example, recently in one of the organization I was seconded to support, we have the implementation of one of the ERP system, and it's one of the biggest actually. But what really I found, they are not yet ready. Why? Because they were happy with whatever they deliver to their client, but they admit by the end that they have to be part of the change. They have to adapt the new trend, especially with the open AI. Open AI make paradigm change when it comes to the technology, and I think that really what we noticed, especially in last couple of years, where a lot of things get really much better than before. But still, I think it's in the beginning of this era when it comes to the open AI and machine learning.
I think that's the key. Sometimes in these conversations we talk about data like it's just been invented, yesterday, but data's always been here for me. So then the question just becomes, what do we do with it? How do we collect it? How do we drive it into our procurement organization? And then how do we use it? And for me, that's the biggest question. And so when we talk about things like AI, for me, that's the biggest opportunity, because if you're anything like me, you've probably got 1,000 dashboards, Power BIs you can log into at any one time. In fact, sometimes a little bit overwhelming where to look for what piece of information if you're fairly mature in your data estate. So then the opportunity becomes, how can we use AI to look at the data, across multiple pots and multiple sources and drive those insights directly into the people that need them. So for me, I don't want to look at a dashboard anymore. I want an email or an alert via Teams or something else telling me that I need to check something out, or telling me in 6 months, based on the dashboards, X, Y, or Z scenario is going to happen unless I intervene in 3 months. So the technology exists to drive that insight into the organization. So for me, back to the original question, what are we doing with the data and how do we get more insightful around it?
Well, that's it. I mean, if the data is so important and especially with AI, allows you to get to that stage where it's doing a lot of the, I was going to say legwork, but brain work for you, obviously it's essential then to have good, clean data. But I don't think we're at that stage, are we? Unless someone can tell me that they've got fantastic data and it's all clean. So how do we get to that stage where we're looking at the data that matters most and really cleansing that and making the most of that data to make sure that it's useful? Because without that data, then AI is pretty useless.
Mm-hmm. I think there's an abundance of data. There's too much data. We're saturated with data, and sometimes, as you say, too much data. I love what you said actually about the dashboards, and so I have conversations with CPOs all the time, and most of them say we've seen SRM platforms. Excuse me, my mic's fallen off. We've seen SRM platforms, but none of them do relationships. They are all KPI dashboards, and we want something that does relationships. So there's an abundance of data. Sometimes you've got to disregard a lot of it because it's not actually making your boat go any faster, and it's just I don't know. It's almost like you become I don't know. You become so obsessed with having all of this data around you, but none of it's doing you, or not all of it's doing you any good. So it's understanding what you really need to achieve. What is the data that makes a difference? If it doesn't make a difference, it's great to have it, but it's not necessarily that good to spend so much time looking at it. So really understand what data makes a difference and prioritize it, and then work on making sure that data has some integrity to it, and making sure your data sets are wrong, making sure the data sources are correct. Sometimes data is dirty data is dirty data because it's meant to be, or because that's exactly what you're looking for. So it's hard to explain, but sometimes you won't get a clean data set, and because it's inherent within the environment you're working in. And in that case, the data, I can't really explain what I mean, but sometimes you won't get clean data.
Yeah.
It's dirty data that you're looking at because the subject matter, because it's just the world that you're operating in. I've explained that really badly.
No, look, we're at, the point I want to make, we're at a procurement conference, so I can't speak confidently about how to clean up the data, but what it does tell me is capabilities that we might need as a procurement organization going forward are in those spaces, or partnering more deeply with our IT organization to get that data up to a certain standard. So for me, I separate the two. There's the technical standards that we need in terms of what makes it work, and back to the point I made before, what do we do with it? And I think for me, that's the biggest question.
Again, I'm coming back. I love it. I love it. It's not the efficiency. It's not about the data is not available, or how making clean data about it. It's what I'm missing very much is still point solutions, and the big question: what are the use cases? What are the use cases? Dashboards, over that, long time ago. Alerts, yes, of course, out of a nurse system, I want to have someone giving me alerts into the organization to act on things. And then also recommendation, but that's the effectiveness of the data.
Yeah.
So what are the use cases that drive this effectiveness? And what are the means, of course, as well, right? And if you want, we'll talk nowadays about recommendation engines, right? Because these large language models, of course, all that buzzword around a Copilot or ChatGPT, of course, as the open source part, right, is going to be adopted. Yeah, it's going to be adopted by my stakeholders, right? But then the problem statement and what I'm facing in the organization, of course, on that journey, disruption-wise, I don't want the CTO in my organization. I don't want the garage in my organization because it's a very pointed environment where people are using the data and the rest of the organization doesn't and falls back into old habits. Right? And you made the point right in the beginning, and also for the room and the ones that are live, is do we have that affinity to work with data? Are we the right persons actually to work with this data as well, to use this on a daily basis, to make a decision out of it, right? And to create also those use cases. And it's not about, let's say, a lot of those integrations and data lakes. It's more about how I'm going to cross-fertilize what I've seen as insight, maybe through a garage or maybe through an IT department, but those learnings, how I'm going to cross-fertilize it across my organization. I'll give you an example. I mean, nowadays I go maybe to a recommendation engine and I want everything about the vendor, a supplier, a strategic one, to my organization. He had some behavior in an e-auction just recently in one of the categories. How I'm making sure that this best practice or this behavior is not only captured, right? It's going to be cross-fertilized in my organization as a lesson learned, yeah, to avoid maybe this sort of pain point or to replicate the success as best practice. But ease of use, right? It's almost like I go to the Copilot inside my own data environment, of course, not externally, to cross-fertilize, to give that information to my wider organization. Everybody is aware of it. But that means huge cultural shift. I mean, you all have employees. You are running a large organization, right? People don't even open up. I need metrics to see if the people are using those tools, usage figures, right? I need training, right? I need maybe even other resources that have that skill set and that interest. That's the change, that's the disruption in our practice. But I can tell you, I mean, I have a lot of stakeholders immediately that would be going to ChatGPT actually to gain some knowledge outside the procurement environment about procurement, right?
Totally agree with you. Can I just come back on that very quickly?
Yeah, quickly.
So I've worked as a practitioner for about 25 years, working on the other side as a buyer, on the buying side of the fence. And people don't, you know, I mean, there wasn't really any tech to speak of back then anyway, but the more that tech has come in, people still don't use it. They still don't log in. They just don't. They're busy doing other things or for whatever reason, they don't necessarily log in. So you've got to take an ROI statement for any of these platforms and literally halve them because they're only as good as the paper, the data that goes into them. That's one of the reasons that I say don't create this fantastic array of dashboards that will end up as shelfware. It's live data. It's pushing the data out, as you said. It's alerts being pushed out to the ecosystem, to the customer, to the suppliers, to tier ones, tier zeros, pushing that data out, salient data and calls to action, live data with calls to action. So they get to push a button, takes them straight in to their projects, straight into their actions. They don't need a dashboard. They don't need it. It's not going to mean anything to them, which is the point I was trying to articulate really badly before. But that is the crux of it. People are busy. They're not going to log in. Push it out to them. Whether it's on email, people are invariably still on email. But whatever it is, whether it's SAP, Fiori Tiles, or WhatsApp for Business, or whatever, get it out to the ecosystem. Just what they need. Just at the fingertips and just enough for them to deal with without losing them.
And that's one of the points, of course. I can't get them to subscribe, or some of them I can't get to subscribe to that sort of agenda. So I'm publishing it, right, to force it onto them. But I'm even saying, I think it's even a wrong approach to take coach packages any longer. because they keep on being on this kind of efficiency track. But as long as I can't understand my own data, how I've gathered it, my own logic to it in my organization, not me, but the organization, in doing the integration work and collecting that data, I'm very dependent. Yeah? Then I'm going to get the system integrators, the IT departments, right, that basically deliver that sort of published data to me. And that's wrong. That sort of already makes it absurd in terms of I'm looking for insights through the data delivery. So dashboards, of course, no way, and alerts is one of those steps, of course, but the other one is get into the same usage that we are now privately used to in terms of a co-pilot. What does a co-pilot mean in the procurement and supply chain practice?
Yeah, and I think, so we're in an environment where the amount of data that we're using in our day jobs is growing and growing. But one of the reflections I have, it's a skill in how we use that data to influence. You know, if I'm in a bad mood and I don't want to do something, if someone turns up and puts something on my desk that says the data says to do something different, it's going to be a hard time to convince me because I've got a feeling here I should do something else. So, I think more and more we need to partner or pair the understanding of data and the analytics and being able to speak with that vocabulary, but also matching that with influencing and storytelling to be able to tell the story of that data. Because I think, I've seen situations where statistically we shouldn't be doing something. We shouldn't be inviting a supplier in March because they never win in March. We've got that down to that level of data, but then you go and tell a stakeholder it's March, you're not including the supplier you want, they're probably not going to be interested, or they think you've gone. So I think there's certainly a skill or a capability we need to develop within the function around that storytelling approach for the data.
Walid, I want to bring you back in here as well. Dirk mentioned in one of his previous comments talking about a changing, a changing culture being required, and also maybe more transparency. What's your take on that as well?
Okay. First of all, as procurement people, are we ready to change our, let's say, role? Take example, the normal customer who used to buy simple stuff before Amazon and after Amazon. You see, if we consider ourselves the salespeople before Amazon, are we willing to give that role to the that way of digital transaction with the customers? In a way, we play a role in any organization to support their main function. We are not the center of the universe when it comes to the procurement, but in the same time, we are not giving the opportunity to end user, mainly, to buy their stuff in the easiest way. We tend to still hold that control. So again, are we in that position where we can easily go to backstage and make or give the opportunity for artificial intelligence, machine learning to replace our role, not fully, at least most of the non-adding value for the procurement professionals, where easily the end user can get the services, the goods they want in much easier way. A good example, what I noticed recently, end user most of the time they struggle in writing the right specification or right scope of work. With ChatGPT and other open AI that become almost not there. At the same time, when it comes to the data and data accuracy, I think this is exactly what we need to do. Allow the AI to enhance the accuracy of the data where for us and for the decision maker it will be much easier for them to get exact data and help them taking the decision. I think this is the future, and this is what will happen in very very soon within the era of the artificial intelligence and machine learning.
I've seen lots of nodding heads while you've been talking, Walid, so that's probably a good thing. Dirk, you were nodding most furiously, I think, of the other three.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to have someone in my organization that basically now proclaims to the business there's a marketplace, right? And there's catalog buying now automated. I mean, that would be wrong in time, right? After Amazon Business Services being available, and marketplaces being available to manage long-tail spend, right?
Yeah.
That needs to be there. That's one of the disruption, and the role changed. Yeah, I don't need those people in my organization any longer, right? And I don't wait for, let's say, the ERP packages, yeah, that or other COTS packages that basically proclaim how I'm going to do the long-tail spend and how I'm going to drive that sort of efficiency. Role has changed, and therefore I'm saying as well, with that digital disruption, if you want to have the scope actually by ChatGPT and your business stakeholders are using it, right, written up, yeah, you better provide other skills in the organization and other organizational design in your procurement and supply chain organization to cater for it. That is exactly the disruption. And procurement, of course, not standalone, yeah, but we can be the disruptor towards the business. In that organizational design already we can be the change. If your organization allows it, if you are empowered to make that disruption and organizational change, you can be the trailblazer to others. That basically transforms maybe the GT, the group technology guys, right, in their organizational setup, how they've been using the data and how they're going to be using systems in the future, or how they're going to write, yeah, system integration scopes for RFPs to be sent out, right? No, that's an absolutely good point, but time has passed on. I'm not talking about catalog buying or an internal corporate marketplace to be the digital solution.
Do we have any questions from the audience at all? If you do, please put your hand up. We do. Could we get a microphone out, please? Thank you. Amber? Just see if our helper is backstage. Just 1 second.
So not much interest if I'm only seeing 2 hands.
I just they're scared.
3 hands.
They're scared.
Here we go.
If you just give the microphone to the gentleman in the second row there, please. If you just start by just stating your name and where you're from, please, that'd be great.
Sure. Hi, my name is Tim Jenkins from Headspace. Really fascinating listening to the panel this morning, especially listening to the points, Nick, that you were making around it's all very well having this data and all of this wonderful data, but the reality is that procurement's biggest challenge is actually not necessarily with your supplier market, it's how you actually communicate and build relationships with your stakeholder markets. But the issue is that most of the time, procurement are only engaging with your stakeholders during the commercial process. And Dirk, you were talking about insights and how we share these insights, but what I'm interested to know is what are the panel doing to build a culture within their within their procurement teams to engage with stakeholders outside of the commercial process? Because if the only time you ever have your procurement teams engage with your stakeholders is when you're being parental and when you're trying to get them to follow rules, and that's the only time you're sharing insights, then how are you going to build a relationship where they see you as trusted advisors?
It's a great question. Who wants to go first there?
I'll jump in.
Go for it.
So obviously we're a vendor rather than a BP, so we work for organisations such as BP. And as I said, I've been doing this for a number of years, and a lot of what Sapico is almost like me in a can, to be honest with you, as a practitioner and taking all of that learning. And for me, procurement is a facilitator of a relationship. They let contracts. In the old world, they would have let contracts. They would have been very spend-focused, etc. And we know all of that stuff about procurement, having to learn and upskill and that whole conversation. It's true, but essentially, they are the facilitators of a company-wide relationship. And what we do as an organisation is to create a relationship infrastructure that breaks the entire end-to-end relationship down into different areas. We call it 4 pillars. It breaks everything down into relationship, commercial, project, and service, with a whole bunch of different subcategories or workspaces or whatever you want to call them. And each of those areas, so they are naturally geared towards the different communities that service that part of an engagement, such as commercial, procurement, and project, etc. So it naturally complements that engagement, and you are actively encouraged on the platform or engaging through our services to go and garner feedback and contribution from the wider business. Because at the end of the day, the contracts are there to service the business, not to service procurement. So it naturally follows that you engage those areas of business and bring them all in.
I think it's a really, really good question. For me, it's the crux of why we do digital, and it touches on what I said at the start. It's to create that space to get out of the more repetitive, high volume, commoditized tasks, the space and time to then start to think about how do we better serve the strategy and deliver the plan. And, you know, specifically to your question, getting involved and having the time to sit with those stakeholders earlier on in the process, understand what we want to do, and come up with some really disruptive thinking, disruptive ideas. You know, I'm not talking about a different supplier that you didn't know about. I'm talking about complete curveball, you know, partnering with a brand new organization to co-develop something that hasn't yet been invented. So it's those kind of conversations that, for me, these kind of digital tools unlock the ability to have, together with the culture of storytelling and influencing, you know, inquisitiveness, tenacity, and underpinned by the data that we've all just talked about to drive those conversations. So it all kind of links in together. But for me, that's, you know, is a really good question, because that's one of the biggest reasons for what I do.
I'll build on this. Absolutely good problem statement, right? You want to be at the table, right? And digital, data-driven decision-making and those insights, they're not standing alone, right? For that sort of purpose. So the message conveyed is the organization and process model, how you conduct procurement, needs to change, right? Otherwise, it's this kind of waterfall principle. I get engaged here. That's my responsibility. And after the RFP and the contract is concluded, I walk. So it's that sort of disruption is not meant by pushing data into the organization and insights per se. It's about changing how the organization in its totality behaves. So what we have adopted, and that's big surprise that the HR group department has chosen procurement and supply chain as the first, let's say, business servicing function to alter the organizational design, is cross-functional teams. I mean, previously, over the past 20 years, McKinsey came in and saying, you need those sourcing waves, and let's create cross-functional teams. Now, we have adopted in procurement and supply chain a Scrum methodology. We are coming up with cross-functional teams, and before even the demand comes up or even gets detected as demand, yeah, the sprint teams, the squad teams, and the cross-functional teams with the business, before the business maybe not even talked about the requirements and the scope, because they have interacted with the supplier market up front before coming to procurement and supply chain. Now, that lead function is being done now in cross-functional teams by procurement and supply chain experts to bring them on the table. And they are not Scrum certified, right? But they want to become Scrum certified and being more agile as well, driving, of course, also different things like not waterfall based. I wait for the scope to be designed, right? I don't influence the scope. And I don't even want to know about innovation because I can't compare the vendors afterwards in procurement. So that thing is going to be upfront, determined in cross-functional teams before you're heading out, and even joint collaboration with the vendors already at that time, even if the scope is not finished. And that's all driven by digitized, right? Because there are toolings that can monitor those pain points, incidents, gives you metrics towards the business as well, where they stand in terms of more PMO capabilities that you drive, and you're going to be at the table, right, as the Scrum Master for them. So that's the disruption, not digital as a disruption per se.
It's a great analogy. Digital, obviously SaaS built, agile, procurement run as agile. One of the core elements or key, the core requirements of agile is enhanced collaboration.
Yes, but that has a lot of impact on HR in terms of the people there in your organization and the organizational design, right? Because it also means that your business stakeholders might need to have a more flattened organization as well, right, in how they interact with procurement and supply chain. But that's the disruption.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry, we're going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. We're completely over time. I'm sorry, we don't have time for any more questions, but I'm sure that our speakers will be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I know that a few of them are definitely going to be here later on today and possibly tomorrow as well. But for now, please join me in thanking Nick, Sheldon, Waleed, and Dirk. Thank you.
Thank you.